Hi everyone. I have scraps. Scrap management sometimes is a lot of work. I'm going to show you how to make an awesome quilt using your scraps. Hi YouTube Landia. This is going to be a highly edited video. I have tried to start filming this video and I have attempted to do this for about 4 weekends. I'm going to call it Scrapyard. Hi everyone. Today we're going to be doing Trip Around the World. You're going to be learning how to make this block with a technique called webbing. I have left no scrap unturned. And I'll insert a graphic here to show you exactly what the quilt's going to look like. Tips. I am using 2-inch squares. You can use any size square you want. Okay everybody, today we're starting on the Trip Around the World. Let's talk a little bit about how I lay out my pieces. I am just going to grab, and this also does not matter, I'm grabbing a match set of fabric. You do not have to have a match set. You can use all different blacks throughout this, but the key to this is running a black down the center. And my black is going to run 7 by 7. And I'm just going to start by laying this out. Okay, the next step on this is to gradually go to a lighter color. This means I can use brown here, I can use dark blue, I can use burgundy, I can use red, I can use green, I can use anything that is going to be lighter than the black. Let's see how many of these I've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that's enough. Then I come back and I line this. Now I could go ahead and start laying in my very light fabrics. I could go maybe a loud neutral next that complements this color, although that's not necessary. Or I can still go in with a lighter shade of purple. That's what I'm doing here. Getting rid of some of this very dated fabric. And I'm finding that the more dated the fabric is, the better off these turn out, believe it or not. All right, I've got this side done. Now I need to lay in the next side, and I think I'm going to do some brown. Let me get my brown pieces. And I know I don't have enough browns here to be cohesive, so I know I need at least 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, look at that. Okay. I'm just gonna put these in here randomly, and then you can have these turned any old way you want. I've got brown in there. Now I'm gonna go a little bit lighter. I haven't used orange in quite a bit. Let's see what I've got for orange. 5. And now the rest of this I'm gonna fill in with loud neutrals or neutrals. So because I'm going with a purple theme on this side, I'm going to go ahead and go with a loud neutral next. I'm going to continue on and finish this, and the more variety you get, the more this sparkles. Okay, so I have laid this out. I filmed it and forgot to film it. Oh. Okay, I'm on my last piece of my row. Or should I say column? And this is where it changes from chain piecing to webbing. All right, I'm going to remove this out of the machine. I'm going to leave all of these together. This is all one long strip. I'm going to open up my first piece, and then I'm going to come over and get a square from my next square from my pile. Line it up. And continue on. So I'm opening my piece, getting another piece. Okay, I'm down to my last piece on my column. Again, I break my thread to start sewing my next piece in the row. But notice all of my pieces all are connected as I'm sewing all the way down. This is called webbing. So all of these are all connected. Right now they're flip-floppy. Okay, and then I start my next row, or my next piece in the column. And I'm gonna skip until I have all of these pieces sewn, and then I'm gonna come back. All right, I'm down to my last 3 pieces of webbing all of this together. Last piece. I've managed to chain piece all of these, breaking my thread at the end of each row, but they are all together. So all of these are connected. They can't be separated. Also, they don't get out of order. The only thing I don't like about webbing is when I go to nest my seams, I cannot spin my seams. So because they're connected. Let me show you what I'm talking about. When I sew this row, after I get done sewing it, when I go to flip this, there's a thread there. It's not going to allow me to spin my seam. So, for instance, notice I cannot rip my seam this way without cutting that thread. Then I could spin my seam. But for right now, I'm just pressing all of them all one way and then sewing them together. That is webbing. If I'm not mistaken, these will end up measuring, if you're using a 2-inch square, they'll measure around 10 inches. So I want to make this 8 across by 8 down, so that would be 80 by 80. And this will use approximately 3,200 squares. Do you have to lay them out with X's and O's? No, you can lay these out in a a chevron. You can lay these out as lines, diagonal lines. I am going with this layout because it just really, really sparkles and shines the colors. And I'm really, really loving the reds and the purples in this. It just really does something for it. I started that, all of that work you just saw happened in about 5 days' time. Have I made a dent in this? Yes. I have some pieces laid out for block potential, and then I go ahead and I start with my black and I run 7 squares down, and then I come out from that with a darker color and stair step that, and that's 6 each on each side. And the only reason I'm doing it this way is because I already have all of these squares all cut. The trip around the world can be done with strip piecing. I'm not going to do it that way. I really, really like the effect of gradient outward, where this is dark and then it slowly goes to light. Let's go back to the quilt. Okay, you can definitely see where my block starts and ends. The humidity has kind of curled my block. Here I did a stair step of every color that was what it was supposed to be. And when you step back from this, you can see it, but because it's up against this next block that doesn't use those colors, you really can't see it, okay? And looking at this, I see this one. I used a very bright green, a lighter green, and then a yellowish green, and it just sparkles. This is a great scrap buster. I know I'm forgetting to tell you something. The older and dated the fabric is, the prettier this is. I assume this is probably from 1970. I don't know. I assume this is from the 90s. Let's see. I'm trying to find some old stuff. This might even be older than that. This looks like chintz from the 90s. And I've got new fabrics in here as well. As you can see, I've got lots of loud neutrals. Right here, those flowers, that's very loud. It all works. There's a really loud block right there. Noticed I have brought this out even further with a green and a yellow, and because they're on the neutral side, when you pair it next to it, it really goes with it. Again, loud neutrals, it works well. Again, I pushed record and thought I had already said this and went back and reviewed my video, and I did not. How am I getting all these squares? For years, I have always cut my scraps down to 3 different usable square sizes, 1.5, 2, and 2.5 inch squares. Some of this is from that. I had 2-gallon bags of scraps given to me by a fellow quilter. I'm assuming she cut them up because they were dated and ugly and then didn't know how to use them. I have already reached out to her and shown her the work that I'm doing, and I'm pretty sure she probably wants her squares back. What I haven't got cut, I have ran out of neutrals. I did have to go to the neutral pile, and I did have to cut new neutrals, and that's fine. 2 ways to do it. Well, actually 3. You can do it with the traditional rotary cutter and ruler. Simple. You can also use an AccuQuilt, and you can also use your Stripology ruler if you have that. Out of all of those options, I'm finding that the Stripology, and I think this one's a June Taylor, but it's got the slots in it, that I'm finding that this is the fastest way to cut I can, if I layer my fabrics 3 deep and on a fat quarter, I can cut about 80 squares in less than a minute. Let me know in the comments below if you have ever made a trip around the world quilt or what method you use to make it. Pressing. So I really didn't cover this as well. As you run these through your machine, because you've staggered your seams and nested your seams, that's going to determine how most of this is pressed. But then you're going to have your long seams here, and basically I am just putting them on the ironing board and just pressing them all one way. That's how I'm doing it. I know that when I rotate these, some of these will nest and some of them won't. I am not going to worry about that. I'm still not quite sure what I want to say about this quilt. Calculations. This is going to use 3,100, over 3,100, but less than 3,200 squares. And my scrap bin of squares was all the way to the top, and now it's decreased by almost 3/4. I have like half my bin, my shoebox bin left. So from start to this point, it took me less than 1 month. The majority of this was made over the Black Friday weekend, Thanksgiving weekend. I actually webbed this quilt top when I put it together, and there are pros and cons of webbing. The pros for webbing a quilt top. I actually pieced this down at my mother's house, and she does not have a design wall, so I could not lay this out. So as I sewed my 2 blocks together, I could lay them out after I stitched them together and then pair up another scrap block to try and keep my scraps separate, because some of these scraps are used in several places in the quilt. That was great. That allowed me to sew all of my rows together and keep my X's and O's on this pattern correct to where they didn't get flip-flopped, and I didn't have to use a seam ripper. The cons about doing it like that is that every time you add a piece, you are constantly handling the quilt as you're piecing it, and you're constantly moving it across your table, under your foot of your sewing machine, and it really does a number on the edge. I don't know if you can see this. This is really frayed. Lots of fraying occurs doing it that way. I didn't like that part. And this is the first quilt top I've webbed. It allowed me to not finish, but keep everything in order, bring all my stuff home, and then I was able to put it up on my design wall and it stayed in order. So there's that. Am I going to web a quilt top again? I don't plan on it unless I'm at retreat or something that does not have a design wall. I like taking my 2 blocks at a time, putting them back on my wall, grabbing 2 more blocks. So webbing the quilt top I did not like. However, webbing the quilt block, I loved that. It kept everything in order. I never had to seam rip because I accidentally flipped something around the wrong way. This was all stitched on my featherweight and then on my mom's featherweight. Note to self, I gave Mom that featherweight, and it's a beautiful machine. It's shiny. Oh, it's so beautiful. But that stupid machine, the sole plate, is raised up just enough, and that front edge is not beveled. And so every time a seam hits it, it flips the seam. That's what I hated about that machine. Could it be fixed? I don't know. Can you file down a sole plate without messing up the finish on it? I don't know. If if I ever get that machine back one day, I'll take the sole plate off the one I have and put it on that one, and then have a pretty nice machine that does not flip my seams. Let's see. So the main thing that quilters struggle with is how to put the scraps together. This is a prime example of how to put scraps together, but this was worth the wait. But as you can see, I used every color. Everything got thrown in this quilt except the kitchen sink. So I have just random stuff when you're building your blocks. If you only have, like, this is a row of 6 blues. If you only have a row of 6 or a 5, you can just put another blue in there. It doesn't matter. And I've done that. And let's see, where did I do that? Right here. So you can see these pinks. I've got a light pink, a medium pink, another light pink, and then 2 darker pinks. When you step back from the quilt, it all still registers pink. This is your time to use your fabrics that you have not successfully been able to use in your other scrap quilts. Prime example is this fabric. This fabric is considered a neutral. It's a white background, but it has lots of saturated color. I could never ever use that in a quilt because it was too loud. The volume of that was just too loud. But in this one, because I'm transitioning from a darker print to a lighter print, I can put that in between and use it. And there are several instances of that going on in this quilt that I can't use that in another quilt, but I was successfully able to use it in this one. I know if I cut my yardage up to make this, with the fabric, I can get 22-inch squares. And mind you, you don't have to use 2-inch squares. You can use 2.5, you can use 3.5, you can use 1.5, whatever your heart desires, whatever size you have. You could even use 6-inch squares. I knew I could get 20 squares in, and I knew there are how many 2 inches in 36. And then I did some math, got the yardage count. So you are going to use between 8.5 and 9 yards of scraps. You are going to notice a huge difference in your scrap bin. But golly, it sure is satisfying. For once in my scrap quilting life, I was able to see my bins diminish. A labor of love. Like I said, I have filmed this about 3 or 4 times, and each time I don't know what to say. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. Insert Vanna White here. Thanks for watching.